Hello everybody. If you want to read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you. Short story 219, The Curious Case of the Missing Muffins and the Secret Recipe. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, a portly Persian with a permanently disgruntled expression, surveyed the chaotic scene for the third time that morning. Flour dusted the air, mixing with the sweet, cloying scent of overripe bananas. Empty muffin tins sat on the counter, mocking reminders of a crime most foul, the complete and utter disappearance of Mrs. Miggins's prize-winning banana nut muffins. This, Sergeant Bottom declared, his voice a low rumble, is a catastrophe of epic proportions. Mrs. Miggins, the owner of Miggins Muffin Emporium, stood beside him, her normally booming voice reduced to a whimper. Every single banana nut muffin, Sergeant. Gone. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, known for his stoicism, felt a tremor of unease. Missing muffins were serious business, and these weren't just any muffins. Mrs. Miggins's banana nut recipe was legendary, a closely guarded secret passed down through generations. Its disappearance was a potential threat to the very foundation of Miggins's Muffin Emporium. He hopped onto a nearby chair, his fluffy belly nearly brushing the countertop. Tiny paw prints, barely visible on the flour-dusted surface, led away from the crime scene. Following the trail, Sergeant Fuzzbottom navigated the maze of baking supplies in the storeroom. Flour sacks stacked precariously threatened to topple over, and jars of jam cast eerie shadows in the dim light. Finally he found the culprit, Pip, a mischievous little hamster and resident of the bakery. Pip, usually a model citizen with a penchant for collecting stray breadcrumbs, looked decidedly suspicious. A spear of banana filling decorated his cheek, and his previously flat stomach now sported a distinct bulge. Scattered around him were crumbs and half-eaten muffin remnants. "Pip!" Sergeant Fuzzbottom boomed, his voice echoing in the cramped space. "What have you done?" Pip squeaked in surprise, banana filler clinging to his fur. "But, Sergeant, the muffins were calling out to me. They were lonely," his voice squeaked, a touch too high-pitched. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, despite his gruff exterior, knew a lie when he heard one. Yet just as he was about to launch into a stern reprimand, Mrs. Miggins, who had followed them, intervened. "Oh, Pip," she said, a weary smile gracing her lips. Pip, despite his occasional pastry-related crimes, was a beloved resident of the bakery. "You can't just eat all the muffins, especially not these ones." Sergeant Fuzzbottom, however, saw a flicker of opportunity. "Perhaps, Mrs. Miggins," he purred, his voice surprisingly smooth, "we can use Pip's enthusiasm to our advantage." Intrigued, Mrs. Miggins raised an eyebrow. Sergeant Fuzzbottom explained his plan. Pip, with his discerning taste buds and adventurous spirit, would become the official muffin mystery solver. His task wouldn't be to eat the muffins, but to sniff them out and identify any potential threats. Stale ingredients, faulty ovens, disgruntled bakers, though Sergeant Fuzzbottom kept that last part to himself. Pip, eyes sparkling with delight, squeaked his agreement. Mrs. Miggins, after a moment's hesitation, chuckled. "Perhaps," Sergeant Fuzzbottom mused, "even a case of missing muffins could lead to a sweeter outcome." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Pip, sporting a tiny detective hat, courtesy of Mrs. Miggins's granddaughter, scurried around the bakery, his tiny nose twitching. He sniffed out faulty temperature gauges in the ovens, uncovered a hidden stash of past their prime walnuts, a potential culprit for the missing muffins, and even alerted Sergeant Fuzzbottom to a suspicious stray cat lurking around the back door, a potential muffin thief. However, the mystery of the missing banana nut muffins remained unsolved. Mrs. Miggins, desperate and on the verge of tears, considered abandoning the recipe altogether. Just then, Pip, ever the resourceful detective, scurried up Sergeant Fuzzbottom's leg, a frantic squeak escaping his tiny mouth. He led them to an unexpected location, Mrs. Miggins's attic, a dusty, forgotten space filled with antique furniture and forgotten trinkets. There, nestled amidst dusty old cookbooks and moth-eaten tea towels, they found a small wooden box. Inside, wrapped in a faded silk, lay a worn leather-bound diary. On the first page, in Mrs. Miggins's grandmother's elegant handwriting, was the secret recipe for the banana nut muffins, complete with a frantic note about a mischievous squirrel who had once stolen a batch of the muffins. The mystery was solved, the recipe recovered. Tears, this time of relief, welled up in Mrs. Miggins's eyes. She scooped Pip up in a grateful hug, showering him with praise. The little detective, his tiny chest puffing with pride, squeaked happily. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, ever the professional, cleared his throat. "The case may be closed, Mrs. Miggins," he stated, "but there's one loose end." Mrs. Miggins, wiping her eyes, looked at him questioningly. "What's that, Sergeant?" He pointed a paw towards the empty muffin tins. "Those missing muffins, we still don't know who ate them." Pip, realizing the gravity of the situation, let out a panicked squeak. Mrs. Miggins, however, simply chuckled. "Don't worry, Sergeant," she said, a mischievous glint in her eye. "I have a feeling I know who the culprit is." Later that afternoon, a delicious aroma wafted through the bakery. It wasn't the sweet smell of baking bananas, but a savoury combination of cheese and herbs. Mrs. Miggins emerged from the kitchen, a warm smile on her face, carrying a plate of freshly baked mini quiches. "Sergeant Fuzzbottom," she said, her voice teasing, "I believe this is yours." On the plate sat a single, half-eaten mini quiche, with a tiny blue bandana perched carelessly beside it. Sergeant Fuzzbottom, his usual stoicism momentarily replaced by a sheepish grin, reached out a paw and snagged the bandana. Pip, nestled comfortably inside, blinked innocently. The mystery of the missing muffins may have been solved, but a new tradition was born. Every time Mrs. Miggins baked a new recipe, Sergeant Fuzzbottom, and perhaps his furry assistant Pip, would be the first to sample it. The bakery, despite the occasional missing pastry, remained a haven of deliciousness, laughter, and the unlikely friendship between a grumpy detective cat and a curious muffin-loving hamster. Vocabulary notes. Catastrophe, noun, a sudden and widespread disaster. Stoicism, noun, the endurance of pain or hardship without complaint. Discerning, adjective, having or showing good judgment. Enthusiasm, noun, eagerness and interest. Whimper, verb, to cry softly and weakly. Guarded, adjective, carefully protected and kept secret. Precarious, in a state of likely to fall or give way. Eerie, adjective, mysterious or strange in a way that is frightening. Crumbs, noun, small pieces of something broken or crushed, especially bread or cake. Stern, adjective, strict, harsh and serious. Intrigued, adjective, having your interest strongly aroused. Whirlwind, noun, a situation or period of great activity and confusion. Disgruntled, adjective, dissatisfied and annoyed. Hesitation, noun, a pause or delay caused by uncertainty. Resourceful, adjective, able to find clever ways to deal with difficult situations. Frantic, adjective, wildly excited or anxious. Trinkets, noun, small ornaments or objects of little value. Worn, adjective, damaged or showing signs of wear and tear through use. Elegant, adjective, graceful and stylish in appearance or manner. Relief, noun, the feeling of worry, anxiety or pain being lessened. Loose end, noun, an unresolved problem or detail. Teasing, adjective, intended to annoy someone in a playful way. Savoury, adjective, having a pleasant flavour, typically salty rather than sweet. Stoicism, noun, used again here to emphasise Sergeant Fuzzbottom's usual demeanour. Sheepish, adjective, feeling embarrassed or guilty. Haven, noun, a place of safety or refuge. Unlikely, adjective, not expected or probable. Story written by Google Gemini AI. Images created by ImageFX, Designer, and Firefly AI. To read all the stories in full, please go to www.steveuk.blog. Thank you.